Welcome to Extraordinary Women on thatchannel.com. I'm your host, Shannon Skinner. Half hour, you're going to meet Laura Reinsborough, who is the founder of Not Far From the Tree. Hello, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Thanks so much for being on the show today.
It's my pleasure.
And you look so lovely in red.
Thanks.
The color of apples.
Yeah, there you go.
Or some apples. Anyway, so, you know, it's very suitable for the topic today. Now, you are the founder of Not Far From the Tree. You're a fruit picker. You're an environmentalist.
Yes.
You're a green hero.
Yeah, I never planned this, but now I find myself picking fruit for a living. But it's all come about sort of by accident, but now I run an organization that harvests fruit in the city.
What now this is what Not Far From the Tree does. So you maybe perhaps actually you could explain it.
Sure, yeah. So it's a fruit picking project. The way it works is pretty simple, that a homeowner has a fruit tree in their yard, and for various reasons they don't know what to do with it all. So we organize teams of volunteers to go and harvest the fruit from their tree, and everything is shared. We divide it into thirds. So 1/3 is offered to the homeowner, and even that is often too much for one household to handle. 1/3 is offered to the volunteer pickers, so everybody who comes to help out gets to go home with some fruit in their bag. And then the final third is donated to food banks and shelters right there in the neighborhood, and we actually distribute it all by bicycle.
And so why by bicycle? Is it?
We're committed to sustainable transportation. It certainly makes for a few interesting adventures as we're carting fruit around the city in bicycles and with bike trailers. But it reduces the carbon footprint that is involved with the project, and it's very much an environmental initiative, so we're committed to doing it that way.
And now it's a not-for-profit organization.
Yes.
You started it not that long ago.
2008 was our very first season when we harvested just from one neighborhood in Toronto and managed to pick just over 3,000 pounds of fruit from that one neighborhood. And at the time, that was it was volunteer for me as well. So it took a lot of effort, and it was quite the adventure to get it all off the ground. But we knew with the success of picking that much fruit in just one neighborhood that it could be expanded across the city. So last year, in 2009, we expanded to 2 more neighborhoods, so we tripled our scope, and we're able to pick over 8,000 pounds. This year, in 5 neighborhoods, we've picked nearly 20,000 pounds of fruit.
Now, 20,000 pounds of fruit. In a little bit of research that I was doing last night, your average pickup truck weighs about 10,000 pounds. So you've actually picked about 2 pickup trucks of fruit this year, and
right.
that's quite astonishing.
It's a very large amount of fruit, and to think that it's coming from the city. Most of the areas we've been picking from this year were in the downtown core of Toronto, and that's not the image that most people have of Toronto, of Canada's largest city. We don't see this as a fertile space where food can be grown, and we often don't see this as a place where we would trust in what's growing from our city soil. But being able to produce that abundance of fruit has helped shift people's perspectives about this city, and we start to notice not just where the fruit trees are in the city, but also where there's potential to plant more. That there's a lot of unused space in the city, and there's a lot of potential to be growing our own food and taking some of that strain off of the global food supply. Even in peak harvest season in Ontario, where plenty of apples are grown, we often get imports from elsewhere. So if we can try to take some of that load off of the global food system by producing our own food here, then that's a boon for everybody.
Now, I had no idea that in Toronto we could we grew or grow apricots, nectarines, figs, plums, peaches.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no idea.
There's a wealth of fruit that can be grown here, and the same kind of thing, that it challenges our perspective, our perceptions of the city. But Toronto, even in our northern climate, that we are growing sweet cherries, sour cherries, elderberries, service berries, mulberries, apricots, pears, apples, crab apples, sumac, ginkgo nuts, black walnuts. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but that's all just from what we've picked. And though we've been able to grow very quickly in the first 3 years of our existence and pick, as I said, this year almost 20,000 pounds of fruit, but still that's just a fraction of what's out there. In fact, it's just a quarter of the trees that were registered with us that we were able to pick from this year. And our estimates for what is grown annually across the city is 1.5 million pounds of fruit. And that's not where it's a concerted effort that we're trying to feed ourselves or trying to grow enough fruit for the population. But these are just trees that are in people's yards and for the most part aren't being picked.
Now, how did this idea come to be? As I said to you when I first started chatting with you, when I discovered, about your organization, my description for it was quirky.
Yeah. That's a very fitting adjective, I think.
Now, how did it come to be?
For me personally, it came about a bit by accident. I had studied environmental studies. I'd done my master's, but with a focus on community arts. So I was actually using the arts as a tool for community engagement and working mostly from galleries. When along came this opportunity to start harvesting fruit from the heritage orchard on a city museum property. So the city staff have the capacity to grow these, to cultivate these fruit trees on the property as a museum piece to show what was growing on this orchard with its original owners. But they don't have the capacity to make sure that the harvest is picked and shared and eaten. So without ever having picked fruit from a tree before, I decided that sounds like a fun thing to do on a Saturday morning, and I contacted a few friends and we started going and picking the fruit. And I think even probably the night before, I Googled how to pick an apple. It was very much flying by the seat of our pants, and I saw it as an adventure. Why not? I have nothing to lose in this. And the popularity of it grew very quickly, that the next year we decided this really needs to be something that is done to help out with homeowners who have fruit trees on their property. And there really is an abundance of fruit being grown in the city if only we could organize ourselves to pick it. So by the end of our first season, we had 150 volunteers. There was a clear interest that this was something people wanted to help out with. It's hands-on environmental action. You get to take some of the fruit home, and it's a really engaged way to give back to your community. And so in our third season now, we actually have a team of 700 volunteers. So people are committed to this. We have fruit trees across the city. There are plenty of agencies who are providing the fresh fruit to those who find it most difficult to access fresh fruit in their diets. So it's a win-win-win situation for everybody involved.
And so, the fruit then doesn't have pesticides or insecticides on it, or?
No, we ask the homeowners if they have ever sprayed anything, and if they have in the last year. And there is now a great bylaw in the City of Toronto that prevents people from spraying with pesticides. But we still do ask, just to make sure that we have the faith of the people who are signing up their trees. But at the same time, most of these trees, if people are doing any sort of pest control on the trees, then they are interested in also harvesting from the trees and consuming the fruit themselves. But most of these trees aren't getting that kind of attention. And yet I'm really amazed at the quality of the fruit. In some cases, this fruit is quite neglected, and yet it's able to, the pears in particular are of excellent quality. And even if you get apples that aren't quite the same as in the grocery store, that they'll make a great applesauce or an apple cider. We do apple cider pressing at some events, so there's always a use for it, for sure.
Well, now you've received an Environmental Award of Excellence from the City of Toronto. You've been awarded the Urban Leadership Award for City Soul from the Canadian Urban Institute. You've been selected as a Hometown Heroes finalist by Earth Day Canada. And you've been named one of 50 reasons to love Toronto now by Toronto Life.
Yeah, there's so much love behind Not Far From the Tree. People really latch on to the idea. It's such a simple idea, and yet it has really profound impact. So whether you're interested in it as an environmental initiative, as alleviating hunger and poverty in our city, whether you see it as community building or promoting, promoting local food, that it has profound impact across so many sectors, and yet it's this one very simple act. It's making use of what's already there. That's a no-brainer. People get why this is important and are so excited to put their energy behind it.
Now, Laura, how does it work? If I had a tree that had a lot of fruit, what do I do?
Well, you can register your tree with us. So you can sign it up online. Our website is notfarfromthetree.org. And there's a registration form there. But if going online isn't your thing, then you can always give us a call. And we're actually in between numbers right now, so you would have to go online to check that out. But we would then take your tree into our database, and when it's time for that tree to ripen, if it's starting into cherry season, for example, then we would give you a call and figure out a time that's appropriate for you, and we would be able to send a team of volunteers to harvest the fruit. You don't even have to be home. We'll send the volunteers. They sign liability waivers so that you're not liable for what happens on your property, and then the fruit is all shared. So there might even be a third of the fruit waiting for you on your doorstep when you come home that day. So it's an easy thing to participate in, and we leave your yard free of any waste, and you know that you've contributed to the community.
Now, we're going to talk a bit more about this, but we're going to take a break. And before we do, I have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top tip on creating a successful life. Laura, I know you've got a great one.
My tip would be to dream big. So no matter the scope of your project, once you have an idea, dream big and big and big with no restrictions. Make it as wild as it can be. Then, after that idea has reached its full potential that way, scale it down to something that is manageable for you.
Thank you. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, more with Laura Reinsborough. Welcome back to Extraordinary Women on thatchannel.com. I'm Shannon Skinner, and I'm speaking with Laura Reinsborough. Now, what have been some of the challenges in setting up or starting a not-for-profit organization? I know it's not easy.
Well, as I said, I'd never picked fruit from a tree before when we started this project, but I'd never worked with a nonprofit either. So learning how a nonprofit operates and how to avoid some of the pitfalls of the sector, this has been a steep learning curve for me, and I still feel like it's just starting. There's so much to learn about how to run a nonprofit.
Did you have some guidance? Did you have a mentor?
Yeah, there are several nonprofits in the environment, in environmental initiatives, but also food security initiatives, who have been providing some mentorship and providing their advice and guidance about the best ways to establish one. But I think one of the biggest challenges is that this is the kind of project that looks like it's quite simple to operate. It looks like, oh yeah, the volunteers go and they pick the fruit and it's all shared and oh, that's lovely, and it's all tied up in a neat package.
And it sounds like it could be a lot of fun.
It definitely is a lot of fun. That I won't deny. but a lot of the people power and of the organizing that goes behind it is often not as apparent to people who are very supportive of the project. So as it was volunteer for me in the first season, it quickly became a full-time volunteer job, and that is certainly not sustainable. So being able to commit the staff time to running this project in the fruit picking season, but also in the off season, which actually ends up being almost busier as we work on fundraising and developing the organization and trying to expand to more neighborhoods across the city every year. So those things are a bit hidden from view, but those are certainly some of the barriers or the challenges to building up a new organization.
Is this, this is the only one like it, of course, in Toronto.
Yeah.
Do other major cities have something similar?
Yeah, we actually learned from a few groups in British Columbia. And in Ontario, there was one that had existed for a year before us in Hamilton. But one of the biggest feathers in our cap is being able to promote this kind of project to other cities and towns. So we've just been around for 3 seasons now, but we've helped groups get started in Niagara, in Kitchener-Waterloo. Just yesterday I was speaking to somebody in Peterborough, in Edmonton, in Calgary, in Atlanta, Georgia. Last week somebody contacted me from Auckland, New Zealand, wanting to get something started there. So it's an idea that people are really rallying around and wanting it to happen in Toronto, but taking the initiative to make it happen elsewhere as well.
Now, how do you mobilize your volunteers? I mean, those are a lot of volunteers.
We did one call out for volunteers, and it got a great response, but to have 700 volunteers at this point, it's really been through word of mouth. As people hear about the project, they say, hey, that's something I really want to get involved with. And we make it easy for people to get involved. They don't have to have any fruit picking experience before this. They don't have to go through any extensive training. They get trained on the spot when they show up for a pick. We give it's very a bit finicky to figure out exactly when the tree is going to be ready to pick and organize it all. So we give very little notice before we set a team out to do the picking, and we often have to turn a dozen or more people away. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, and we have an incredible crew of really enthusiastic volunteers who know for themselves why this work is important. So the project really sells itself. I can't take credit for that.
Now, does it generate sort of a sense of community?
Definitely. Not only is food a really powerful social connector, but being able to come together and harvest together and to be able to do that in the city where you live is a really, really powerful social connector. So it's linking people in that moment. It's welcoming people into private backyards to do a very public and community oriented initiative. So there's something really quite magical that happens in every pick that we organize, where the volunteers themselves are creating a community, but that it's also breaking down barriers, where something that's hidden behind a private fence is being made into a public asset that's shared in the community. So I can't quite put my finger on that, but there's something really powerful about that transforming one single tree into a community asset.
And of course, there's a cultural power of fruit as well.
Yes, definitely. So food in itself is as we know, people break bread together. We gather around kitchen tables. So much community organizing happens around food. But fruit in particular has really symbolic power, that in every culture, fruit is loaded with meaning. If you look at the way that an apple is used to represent so many things in our culture,
For instance,
we can take it everything from education to innocence to romanticism. There's so many different meanings. New York, there you go. And healthy eating. You know, it wasn't all that long ago that fruit was seen as the most sugary food that we have out there, and now dentists are promoting that people eat apples because it's some of the it's a good alternative to a lot of the other processed sugar that's out there. So there's incredible meaning attached to food and to fruit, and I think that's part of the reason that people can rally around this project.
Now, you do besides the picking or the harvesting, you also do preserving workshops. Is that right?
We do, yeah. So it's in part to store away the fruit to extend the season, so that in the winter you can open up a little bottle of August sunshine or what have you. But it's also about transferring the skills. So the art of preserving food is something that is fading in our culture. And so to be able to transfer those skills, to share those skills and make sure that people know how to do that, that's promoting local food. It's making it's connecting that circle of, okay, you can go and eat in the harvest season, but how do you make that a real effort that is sustained throughout the year?
And it's great that you can ride around on your bicycle and get exercise. You don't have to join a gym.
It's the whole project is a lot of fun. That we're picking fruit, we're biking it around, we're preserving, we're attending community festivals and events to talk about the project. And everywhere that we go, that people get why it's important and put their support behind it. Yeah.
Laura, do you believe that can an ordinary person or can ordinary people change the world?
I think that's the only way that it happens. Sometimes it has to do with the right time and the right moment, but it always has to do with the people who are behind the project. Yeah, and everybody is ordinary, and everybody is able to put that extra effort to make something extraordinary. So
you believe it is possible?
Yeah, certainly.
Do you're a mom. You're a new mom.
I am, yes. A little 10-month-old at home.
So do you take your 10-month with you? On job sites?
We've gone on a few picks together. We have. He's just learning really how to grasp fruit, but he's been a fruit eater for several months now. He's a big fan of anything that grows on a tree, pretty much.
And so was the first word that he'd say with the apple?
Maybe. We're not there yet. But it's really great to see when people do bring their kids on fruit picks with Not Far From the Tree. Kids get it immediately, and I've had great stories from parents after they've brought their kids on picks that they're packing the lunch the next day, and just, creature of habit, they're packing what they usually pack for lunch, and the kid says, "Wait, what about those apples we picked yesterday?" And they get to bring a few extra to school and tell their friends about what they did. And I think that kids really have that power of storytelling and of wanting to share experiences. So there's a lot to be gained from them being involved in this project as well.
So now for people who are watching this show and perhaps there isn't a similar type of organization in their community, what can they do to prevent fruit wastage of their trees and put it to good use? I mean, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, if they have a fruit tree on their property and haven't yet carved out the time to make it happen or worked with neighbors, then I say arrange a pick party. Just make it a fun social time and invite people over. But the same can happen if you see a tree in your neighborhood. That knock on the door. I think that's the biggest barrier to people doing this on their own, on an individual level, is that we fear being going up to somebody's door and asking for permission to do this. Certainly do ask permission, but it's all right to ask, and probably the homeowner is going to be delighted that you would take some of this fruit off of their hands. If you're interested in having other people pick the fruit, put out a classified ad, something on Craigslist, and just invite people to come and pick. Or if you want to be the one doing the picking, do the same thing. Say, hey, if you have a fruit tree, I'm there. So it can happen on a really small level. But if anybody is interested in starting a project of it, or building up an organization at a larger scale, then they can contact any one of our staff at Not Far From the Tree. There's contact information at notfarfromthetree.org, and that's a great way. We're very happy to provide advice on how to start a similar project.
That's fantastic. Well, what does the future hold for Not Far From the Tree?
Well, so far we were just in 5 neighborhoods this year, and the City of Toronto is much larger than that. We've picked only from a quarter of the trees that were registered with us. So our focus is to continue to expand in a sustainable manner so that we will encompass the City of Toronto one day, so that we may be able to pick in all corners of the city. So we hope to expand for this coming season. But we're also working on developing a map of fruit trees on public land. We're looking into the feasibility of developing a fruit tree care program, as people often approach us for advice on how to take care of their fruit trees. And there are so many other ideas that we hope to implement one day.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. Again, so if people want to reach you and find out more information, they can go to notfarfromthetree.org.
Yes.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.
I wish you all the best.